Welcome to the Bare Metal Cybersysm Prepcast. This series helps you prepare for the exam with focused explanations and practical context. Vendors play a central role in most modern organizations, often processing or directly accessing sensitive systems, networks, and data. Because of this, failures at the third-party level can lead to significant consequences, including data breaches, regulatory violations, or operational disruptions that ripple across the enterprise. As outsourcing expands, regulatory frameworks are increasingly requiring formal due diligence around vendor relationships, mandating that organizations not only monitor vendors during engagements, but also assess risk prior to onboarding. Performing vendor risk assessments before any contractual agreement is signed ensures that the organization doesn't inherit unmanaged exposures. Ultimately, the risk posed by vendors must be viewed as an extension of the enterprise's own risk profile, with third-party weaknesses capable of undermining even the most well-structured internal controls. To begin managing vendor risk, organizations must first identify what each vendor does and how they interact with sensitive or mission-critical elements. Vendors should be classified based on the types of data they access or manage, as well as the services they provide. It's important to determine which vendors have entry points into core systems, access to internal networks, or permission to interact with confidential assets. These relationships must be mapped to organizational workflows to understand the dependencies they create and the processes they support. Not all vendors carry the same level of exposure, so it's essential to distinguish between those considered critical or high risk and those with a more limited operational impact. This classification should include cloud service providers, software-as-a-service platforms, consultants, and others across the extended supply chain. Creating a structured vendor risk assessment framework enables consistent and defensible evaluation of external parties. The framework should include standardized criteria that allow evaluators to categorize vendors by their risk levels using common factors such as data sensitivity, regulatory obligations, and the depth of technical integration. These criteria must align with both internal security policies and applicable legal requirements to ensure full coverage. Minimum control expectations should be clearly defined for each vendor category so that low-risk vendors aren't held to the same burdensome standards as high-risk ones, but still meet a basic threshold of safety. All scoring systems, review workflows, and authority levels for approving or rejecting vendors must be documented to promote accountability and transparency across teams. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other podcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Before entering into formal relationships, vendors should undergo thorough pre-engagement assessments to validate their security posture. One common tool is a detailed questionnaire that captures information about the vendor's control environment, security governance practices, certifications, and relevant audit histories. Organizations may also request supporting documentation, such as security policies, audit findings, penetration test reports, and incident response procedures. For high-risk vendors, deeper scrutiny is warranted. This might include interviews with technical leads or even on-site evaluations. Additionally, the organization must understand the vendor's own dependencies by confirming the use of third-party subprocessors and reviewing data flow diagrams that explain how information is transmitted and stored across systems and vendors. Legal and contractual elements are vital to vendor risk management and must be carefully structured to ensure enforceability and compliance. For each vendor engagement, the organization must determine which laws and regulations apply, such as the General Data Protection Regulation, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or the California Consumer Privacy Act. Contracts must include explicit language requiring vendors to comply with these laws, and the right to audit should be granted to the organization or its delegates. Clauses around breach notification timelines, required security practices, and incident response coordination should be standard in every agreement. Contracts should also stipulate adherence to internal security policies and reporting obligations. Throughout this process, security and legal teams must collaborate closely with procurement to ensure consistency and completeness. Selecting a vendor is not simply about functionality or cost. It also requires a clear understanding of the vendor's residual risk once all planned security controls are accounted for. Organizations must assess whether the vendor offers the needed capability while also meeting minimum acceptable security standards and aligning with long-term strategic goals. Selection decisions should be made collaboratively, incorporating input from IT security, legal, and the relevant business stakeholders. The rationale for either accepting or rejecting a vendor should be documented thoroughly, especially in situations where trade-offs are involved. Vendors who cannot demonstrate a commitment to meeting baseline security expectations should not be approved, regardless of their cost savings or technical appeal. Vendor risk must be integrated into the organization's broader governance structure to ensure continuity, visibility, and accountability. Risk levels associated with vendors should be tracked in the organization's risk register, where they can be viewed alongside internal risks and monitored for change. Vendor classification must be reflected in business continuity and incident response plans to ensure that critical suppliers are included in disaster planning. Metrics that reflect vendor risk, assessment scores, or known exceptions should be regularly reported to governance and risk committees. Internal and external audits should include a review of vendor security practices and risk assessments to confirm alignment with enterprise standards. Procedures must also be defined for escalating unresolved or high-risk issues involving vendors to the appropriate leadership bodies. Assessing vendor risk comes with challenges that must be acknowledged and managed. One major difficulty is obtaining complete and consistent information from vendors, especially those that are reluctant to disclose security details or submit to standardized assessments. Without direct system visibility, validating vendor claims can be challenging. Particularly for SaaS or cloud-based providers, organizations may also rely too heavily on standardized contracts without tailoring assessments to the actual nature of the service being delivered. Internal coordination can be a hurdle as well, with security teams, legal departments, and procurement sometimes operating in silos. Finally, the dynamic nature of vendor environments means that risk levels can change quickly due to acquisitions, staff turnover, or new services, requiring constant vigilance. To improve efficiency and coverage, organizations are increasingly using specialized tools and platforms to support vendor risk evaluations. Third-party risk management solutions help automate assessment workflows, send out questionnaires, and track responses. These tools can be supplemented with external intelligence sources such as threat data, breach history databases, and risk rating services to enhance visibility. Vendors can be scored using weighted models that consider both business impact and inherent risk, aligning security concerns with operational priorities. All assessments, contracts, and related documents should be stored in centralized repositories to simplify access and ensure continuity. High-risk or critical vendors should be reassessed regularly, with the frequency based on their classification and ongoing performance. Building a culture that supports security-conscious vendor selection is essential for sustainable risk management. Vendor evaluation must be treated as a continuous, risk-based function, not just a procurement checkbox completed at the end of a sourcing process. Business units should be educated on the importance of involving security teams early in the vendor lifecycle, especially before contracts are signed. Procurement and legal staff must be trained on evaluating vendor risk and recognizing when further analysis is needed. Leadership must visibly support policies and decisions that prioritize security over convenience in the vendor selection process. Aligning these practices with the organization's long-term security and resilience goals ensures that vendor relationships strengthen rather than weaken the overall security posture. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Bare Metal CyberSysm Prepcast. For more episodes, tools, and study support, visit us at baremetalcyber.com.